The ice in the glass was the loudest thing in the room. My mother didn't raise her voice. She never had to. "You two don't belong here tonight," she said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an eviction from the family lineage, delivered between sips of vintage Krug. My father stood behind her, a silhouette of silent agreement. "Maybe some humility," he added, his voice like dry parchment. They were looking at me, but they were talking to the future of the firm. I felt my 7-year-old's hand tighten in mine. She didn't understand the words, but she felt the temperature drop. We walked out without raising our voices. That was their first mistake. They thought silence was submission. In reality, silence is just the space where you do the math. I didn't cry in the car. I just pulled over, looked at the digital clock on the dash, hit 12:01, and made a single call. I needed to know if the leverage was still where I left it. The person on the other end didn't say hello. They just asked if I was finally ready to burn the house down. Power isn't about who owns the building. It's about who understands the debt structure holding it up. My father built a legacy on perceived stability. By Tuesday morning, the expectations began to tighten. The family office wasn't just a pool of wealth. It was a complex web of cross-collateralized loans and vanity projects. My parents had spent 40 years convincing the world they were untouchable. But the market has a way of finding the cracks when someone points them out. I spent my morning in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, watching the board members enter the building. They looked like men who had just realized their parachutes were made of lead. I had spent a decade as the silent architect of their expansion. I knew which signatures were missing. I knew which accounts were offshore. And I knew exactly which bank was about to call in its markers. The system was stable as long as no one asked the wrong question. I was about to ask 3. I opened the folder that contained the one document my father thought he'd shredded in '98. Isolation is a quiet process. It starts when you realize your allies aren't loyal to you. They're loyal to the version of you that pays the bills. By Wednesday, the whispers reached the 2nd floor. My brother called me, his voice shaking, with the kind of fear only a man who has never worked for his money can feel. He asked if I knew why the auditors were in the lobby. I told him to stay calm and check his trust agreement. I didn't tell him I was the one who flagged the irregularities in the 2022 filing. Trust is a luxury for the people at the top. For everyone else, it's a liability. My mother sent a text, "Don't be dramatic, come for dinner." She still thought this was a domestic dispute. She didn't realize the locks on the main gate had already been flagged for replacement. The isolation was almost complete. Soon they would be the only ones left in the room, wondering why the phones had stopped ringing. People only help you when it's in their incentive to do so. I had just changed the incentives. The call coming through wasn't from a friend. It was the lead auditor asking for the decryption key I wasn't supposed to have. Distortion is the art of calling a collapse a restructuring. My parents were masters of PR, but facts are harder to spin than feelings. The public statement was a masterpiece of evasion. They spoke of strategic alignment and intergenerational transition. It was a desperate attempt to frame my exile as a planned departure. In the private meetings, the tone was different. My father was screaming at the CFO about a missing 7% in the liquidity reserve. The distortion was everywhere. Language was replacing truth. They were trying to build a wall of words to hide the fact that the foundation was already gone. I watched the press conference from my laptop in a hotel room. My mother looked perfect, not a hair out of place, even as her empire began to bleed. She was still playing the game of appearances. I was playing the game of math. And the math was moving against them faster than their publicist could type. By noon, the first major investor requested a full redemption. The spin was failing. Reality was finally catching up. The sender of the email was the one person my mother promised would never leave her side. Manipulation is most effective when the target believes the decision was their own idea. I just provided the necessary context. I met with the bank's vice chair in an empty park. No paper, no records, just a conversation about the upcoming quarterly report and the hidden vulnerabilities in the family's real estate portfolio. I didn't tell him to pull the funding. I just pointed out the cost of staying committed to a sinking ship. A strategic move is often just a nudge in the direction gravity is already pulling. He understood. Within 24 hours, the terms of their credit line were reevaluated. My father thought it was a market shift. He didn't see the hand behind the curtain. The decisions were being made in private, far from the boardrooms and the cameras. They were being manipulated by their own fear of losing what they hadn't earned. I was just the one who reminded them that the floor was optional. By the time they realized they were falling, the safety nets had already been removed. It was a clean, quiet dismantling, and it was exactly what they deserved. The vice chair handed me a small, encrypted drive and told me the bank would be making its move at dawn. Betrayal is rarely a sudden explosion. It's a series of small, calculated withdrawals of support. By Thursday, the house was empty. I watched from the shadows as my father's longest-serving partner signed the handover documents. He didn't look up. He didn't have to. The incentives had shifted, and loyalty was no longer profitable. My mother called 17 times. I let everyone go to voicemail. She wanted to talk about family values, while her accountants were shredding evidence of the tax deferrals I designed for them years ago. The betrayal was critical because it happened in the one place they felt safe, their own history. I had spent a decade building their defense. Now I was simply removing the pieces. The true cost of their pride was starting to show. They had spent a lifetime treating people like assets. They forgot that assets can be liquidated. By the time the sun set, the family name was no longer a badge of honor. It was a liability. The move was final, and it was done in total silence. The final document to go through the teeth was the one that proved my mother knew about the fraud from the beginning. Hidden damage is the most dangerous kind. It's the rot in the foundation that you don't see until the roof starts to lean. My father sat at the head of a table that seated 24, eating a solitary meal. He still thought he could sue his way out of this. He didn't realize the legal fees were already eating the principal of his remaining trusts. The damage wasn't just financial, it was systemic. Every connection he'd spent 40 years cultivating was being severed at the root. People stopped returning his calls, not because they were angry, but because they were afraid of the contagion. I had ensured that anyone associated with the firm was now under heightened scrutiny. It was a surgical strike. The true impact wouldn't be visible for months when the property taxes came due and the credit lines stayed frozen. They were living in a ghost empire, presiding over nothing but memories and mounting debt. I watched them wither from a distance, like a gardener watching a plant they'd stopped watering. The rot was complete. They just didn't know it yet. I received a notification that the first of the offshore accounts had been successfully drained into a charity they despised. Revenge isn't a feeling, it's a logistical challenge. It requires patience, precision, and a total lack of empathy for the target. I spent the weekend preparing the final response. It wasn't a public statement or a lawsuit. It was a package delivered to the one agency they feared more than the auditors. I had documented every humility they'd forced on their employees, every corner they'd cut to maintain the illusion of prestige. The setup was quiet. I used the very same offshore structures my father had taught me to build. I was using his own weapons against him. He'd taught me that power was about control. I was about to show him what happens when you lose it. The harmed party, me, my daughter, every employee they'd stepped on, was finally ready. We didn't need to raise our voices. We just needed to press send. The revenge was inevitable because it was built on their own choices. I was just the one who reminded them that the floor was optional. By the time they realized they were falling, the safety nets had already been removed. It was a clean, quiet dismantling, and it was exactly what they deserved. I waited until exactly midnight on Sunday before I finally let the truth go live. The false resolution is the moment they think they've won. It's the breath before the second wave hits. My parents announced a successful merger. They held a press conference Friday afternoon. My mother wore her favorite pearls. My father spoke about new beginnings. They thought the storm had passed. They thought the bank had been satisfied. It was a beautiful performance, but the reversal was already in motion. The merger they'd just signed wasn't a lifeline, it was a Trojan horse. The investor they'd partnered with was a shell company I'd established 3 months ago. I now owned 49% of their remaining assets, and I was about to exercise my right to an immediate audit of the legacy holdings. The look on my father's face when he realized who he'd actually signed with was worth more than the assets themselves. It wasn't a victory, it was a revelation. The hidden truth was that they had been my employees for weeks. They just hadn't read the fine print. The system had changed, the move was irreversible, and they were finally, truly alone. The name at the bottom of the acquisition agreement wasn't a company, it was my daughter's initials. The payoff isn't a celebration, it's just the end of a process. The damage spreads, the system absorbs it, and the world moves on. By the end of the month, the house was sold to a developer who planned to turn it into a community center. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of town they'd never visited. No one raised their voice. There were no dramatic confrontations, just a series of wire transfers and legal filings that systematically erased 40 years of ego. The aftershock hit their social circle next. The invitations stopped. The names were removed from the boards of the charities they'd used for tax breaks. The revenge was inevitable because it was enabled by their own belief that they were above the math. The system absorbed the collapse and moved on. New names appeared on the towers. New families held the parties. I stood in the playground watching my daughter, knowing that the deeper system, the one of power and incentive, remained unchanged. I had just traded one set of debts for another. We walked away without raising our voices, but we left a permanent silence behind us. It was finally, inevitably, over. The math is always right in the end, but it doesn't care if you're happy with the result.